not sure if I should thank you for letting me follow this team. Thanks a lot. But actually, no, thanks a lot because it's a really nice setup to the intervention that I'm going to be talking about today, which is the Getting Ready intervention. It is truly a partnership-based, relationally focused intervention where we focus on all the relationships that are important to children in their young lives. Relationships between parents and children, relationships between parents and teachers, and relationships between children and their providers outside of the home. My husband's in real estate, and he used to always say, it's all about location, location, location. Well, in our world, it's really about relationship, relationship, relationship. So this intervention that I'll be talking about, this program, this approach, in fact, we don't always even call it an intervention because it's more a way of being. It's a way of doing business. It's who we are as educators, as providers, as professionals, as parents, coming together to support what's very important to all of us, and that is the healthy development of the children with whom we share responsibility and care so deeply about. That is really fundamentally what this intervention, this approach is about. And so as I talk through it, you'll see some differences, some really pretty striking differences between what's been talked about already today and the approach that we take, but also some similarities in some of these core values and these fundamental beliefs, because they really do drive the manner in which we interact with, interface with, and connect with families. I too need to be advancing slides, I guess. There we go. Before I go further, I want to acknowledge Dr. Lisa Kanoki, who's here with me today. We're so excited to be here. She has definitely been, one of the key thinkers, doers, researchers related to this work over the years. But there's been a host of other folks too who have really sort of pushed the envelope when it comes to thinking about how to best create conditions under which young children can be successful by bringing this system of support together. Dr. Carolyn Cove-Edwards, we have a deep respect for Carolyn. She really helped develop this program years ago and has helped us really rethink the way we think about relationships, but also people like Chris Marr and Helen Rakes, other methodologists and analysts who have really helped us elevate the work that we're doing to really important complex methodological approaches to understanding how the importance of this relationship is for children. Lots of folks that have also not only helped us on the ground, but helped us communicate the message. And the research has been funded by a number of agencies, including NIH, Institute of Education Sciences, and now currently ACF. Talking about a couple of different randomized trials that have taken place over the years. And so I'm not going to go into a deep dive into any one of them, but really focus on some of the messages, the things that we're learning, the things we're taking home, and how it's driving our next set of questions. But let me start really by talking about how we situate this approach relative to some of the things that you might be thinking about in terms of parent engagement, parent relationship, parent involvement, and other kinds of interventions. I think, and I've been in the field for 30 years, and my thinking has really evolved over time in terms of how do we characterize the type of relationship that is important to us as educators, as providers. And it is the case that just by the sheer fact that we are working on a common goal of supporting the healthy well-being and development of young children, we are in a relationship with parents. As educators, as providers, just by coming together and having that shared focus on a particular child and what's best for that child, there is a relationship. But there's lots of ways that that relationship can take place. On the far left, you'll see a column that unfortunately is too true for too many families and children, and the relationship being one that's really disconnected and unfocused because there's a lack of trust, the kinds of things that we just heard about, the lack of trust, the lack of respect, the lack of understanding and willingness to really get at the core values that we all bring to the table. And sometimes then this manifests in things that are really unhealthy for kids, where it's not always a negative relationship, but it's just sometimes sort of disconnect altogether professionals are doing their own thing. They expect parents to do what's best for their child, but they really don't ask the questions about what are your dreams for your child? What would you like to see? What are the goals that you have? Think out 10, 20 years, how do you want your child to be? Rather, there's a notion that we know what's best for the child. We know how to get them there, and just sort of let's do our thing. In the center is the way that a lot of us think about parent engagement, but it's really more of an involvement capacity, where we want parents to be involved. We want them to be doing good things for their child and supporting their learning and development. And there's nothing wrong with this notion. However, it's really much more the case that it's school directed. It's one way. There is a one-size-fits-all mentality that we know the things that work for kids. Let's make sure all our parents do those same things as though all of them look alike. And we all know that it's not the case. So that's why I love following this group, because they're taking a program that is very evidence-based, and they're wrapping it around this relationship focus, this partnership focus. And that's really fundamentally what our approach is about. Families and teachers working together as partners to support their young children's learning. But again, the children with whom we share goals, we share dreams. We all go into the field that we're in because we want what's best for kids. We have that same, the parents have that same goal. So there is this commitment to working together, to collaborating, to sort of getting on the ground together about what's important for the child, what goals do we share, how do we take the shared responsibility for supporting the healthy upbringing and development of children in a way that creates safe settings, safe conditions, healthy contexts for moving a child from the early years throughout life. And so this partnership is really much more about collaboration than parallel processes going on at home and school. It's more about asking parents what's important, sharing information that we have, and creating a context for a support net for kids, bringing these systems together. But the question really that we hear oftentimes is, well, how do you get parents to school? How do you get parents to come to the groups? How do you get parents to do what we, as the experts, want them to do, right? We flip the script on that. Our main question is really, how do we connect? How do we relate? How do we engage? How do we really come together to support what's important for all of us? And it's going to look different family to family, child to child. It's what we want for each child, even though there are some universals. Really, at the end of the day, we want what's best for them as an individual human being. I like this to show that just because I think it's really important to set the stage for what we're about. And not all buttons work the same up here, it turns out. It's like families, right? Not all the same. You can't push the same buttons. I like that analogy or not. Okay, so what is the getting ready intervention? What is the approach? I'll try to move it along a little bit because I do get on the soapbox. A partnership approach. I think I missed a slide. Yeah. Okay, it's a partnership approach that really promotes children's learning by strengthening relationships, by building competencies and confidences among parents and educators that are responsible for children, and promoting collaboration among families and early childhood educators. The goals are to promote young children's development. Obviously, it's always about the child. So we really keep the child at the center. To promote the young child's development by engaging parents in early and sustained relationships and partnerships. As Karen said, parents are a constant. They're going to be with this child, ideally, in a very healthy kind of way for the child's life. And so we really want to set the stage, helping them recognize this essential role that they play in their children's development. Not just desirable, it's fundamental. To enhance relationships, again, relationships, not only between parent and child, which is absolutely a critical piece of this approach, but also parents and early childhood educators, and children. And you'll see as I start talking about some of the effects of our intervention, a lot of the real significant effects that we're finding are very much about all the relationships in a child's life. One of the things that we've learned in our work on the ground is that Parents really don't care a lot about what we know unless they know that we care. And so that's a message that we really do try to convey early on throughout the course of our work. Again, other goals are to build parents' confidence as your child's first teacher and strengthen collaborative partnerships. Here's one more slide. I've got 2 slides in front of me here, and I'm a little bit disoriented by that. To the left, it is a really flexible approach. The thing to really try to understand about our way of engaging with families is that it is responsive, flexible, and individualized. So we have a set of strategies that our early childhood educators learn to interact with all families in their program. It's, again, a way of doing business. It's how they approach their work with all families. Rather than a set curriculum or a standardized program of scripts and skills that we convey then to parents. So it's a series of strategies that are used across all contexts as that early childhood educators are interfacing with families, and not a protocol that's used in more of a stepwise or standardized fashion. So they learn how to do things like ask meaningful questions, co-develop goals for children, learn about what the realities are across environments so we can pick out things that are strengths and build upon those strengths that help the child meet their goals. Cycle back and understand how the child is progressing and where we can make modifications to improve some of the outcomes related to language, literacy, social emotional skills, etc. And undergirding all of that still is a focus on the relationships that are important for children. So here's what the intervention or the approach kind of looks like. I'll talk this through a little bit. The set of strategies that early childhood educators learn in the context of our coaching and professional development model have to do with communicating openly and honestly with families, helping them feel comfortable sharing their dreams and goals with us as providers, asking important questions. I'll talk about each of these more fully in just a minute, but essentially they go from really this open communication, structuring the context for the relationship, affirming parents' competencies, validating parents as doing the best that they, as loving their child and being there for their child and providing for the child, doing the best for their child, to beginning to focus attention on what's important for development, to going more directive by helping a parent learn how to observe their child and how to use that information to understand what's important next to the child's development, to make some mutual or joint decisions. All of these strategies can be used in any interaction that a parent and teacher have with one another. Certainly there are structured opportunities like home visits and parent-teacher conferences, and I'll talk about how that structure plays out, but there's all kinds of unstructured opportunities, incidental opportunities, where parents and teachers are finding themselves in the same place at the same time, or in the possibility of having some kind of communication exchange, where we can be validating, we can be affirming, we can be dropping observations, we can be asking about how the child is doing, we can be doing things with all of these strategies in all kinds of interactions. And here are the list of those strategies. Again, I mentioned communicating openly and clearly, affirming parents' competencies, focusing attention on child development, helping parents learn how to be good observers and interacting with their child in ways that are scaffolding the child's learning, making joint decisions about what's important, not only now, but we're looking forward, and then using information to create opportunities for homeschool connections so the child has some continuity across contexts that really help them make even greater gains. Sometimes parents need very specific, direct suggestions and feedback around how to interact with their child to support specific goals. For example, if it's an early literacy type goal and we're helping a parent really help their child engage more around book reading, we we will do some direct support around interactive shared book reading, and we'll provide suggestions, and we'll provide feedback, because the child is part of that interaction as well. So we're really taking opportunities to build some of these skills and competencies into the parent-teacher exchange, but it's all enveloped in this very supportive, partnership-oriented, relationship-based approach. Some of the unstructured opportunities are all the time, really, that a parent and a teacher find themselves together. For example, drop off and pick up time, conversations that happen. As we find ourselves connecting and being able to talk about how the child is really sort of presenting and making games, or maybe having some struggles, family socializations, family nights, all of those are structured now in a very intentional way around relationship building and partnership orientations between families and schools. Here's an example of a text message that a teacher sent, an early childhood educator sent to a parent that really picks, you can see a couple of those strategies illustrated very nicely when she says, today I saw Evan share a ball, with his friend on the playground. She's sharing an observation that she saw. She's providing real positive feedback about the child, what she saw him do, and he said, good job. That's something that they had been working on. That was a goal that had been set in their previous interaction. And she's validating the parents by saying, you must really be doing some good things with your child at home. You must be practicing this particular skill that we're working on. So it's very intentional, but yet it's an incidental opportunity to use the strategies in all interactions. The structured process that we see through our home visits and our parent-teacher conferences provides much more of an opportunity to really build in the kinds of things that will then follow the parent and child as they work together over the course of the preschool experience. So in all of the structured opportunities, the parents and teachers come together. And I'll use home visits a lot because that's really the mechanism by which most of this takes place in our particular approach. We have a process, a guide. Again, it's not a script, it's not a curriculum, but we do have a guide of interactions that families and teachers have with one another, where they are sharing observations, setting goals, determining the steps that can be utilized across home and school in a collaborative plan, sharing ideas, trying them out. Children are often present in home visits, and so it's all very much around the parent-child relationship in that context as they're trying new things with the child, and the early childhood educator is actually providing some coaching with the parent in that context. Things that are working are reinforced, things that aren't working are modified, and we continuously use data to drive the decisions around whether or not the goals are on track, how we can enhance the skills, how we can improve the programs, and then move toward the next goal. This approach takes place really throughout the context, the entire period that a child is in a preschool classroom. So if you're with a child in a 3 to 5 year program for 3 to 5 year olds, that parent is always continuously using these strategies with their families. Again, it's a way of doing business. And so they have this opportunity to continuously work together, set goals, assess how the child is progressing, use data that comes from all sources, and work toward that school readiness goal as the child is transitioning into kindergarten. How much time do I have? About another 15? Okay. Oh my goodness, okay. I'm gonna skip the next slide then. Because they had a little video, but I'll just I want to get to the she started. Okay, good. I just want to talk about some of our facts because I think it's really important. I have to take the time to explain the approach a little bit different than some of the things we've heard about, but I'll tell you the effects that we're seeing are really strong, particularly in the area of relationships. The first study that I'll talk about was the first randomized trial, was funded by NIH in an interagency school readiness consortium. But we worked in this particular study across the 0 to 5 continuum. So we had early Head Start families engaged in the intervention. This is data from for our parents related to the early Head Start sample. And these are very low income, very poorly educated families. The context here is primarily a home visitation model. And so our home visitors were utilizing the Getting Ready approach and all of their interactions with families. And you'll see in our parenting outcomes some real differences in the manner in which they were interacting with their children over time between our treatment group and our control group. They all started out at about the same level at the very first assessment period, and over the course of about an 18-month to 2-year, series of work together in their early Head Start experience, we saw significant gains for warmth and sensitivity the parent was demonstrating with their young child. These are, again, 0 to 3-year-olds. Where did you see a downward trend for our control parents? That was very concerning to us. In other areas, you see less of that sort of downward trajectory, but we still see significantly different rates of change and gains for our treatment group around things that are really important in the parent-child relationship. Parents encouraging autonomy, supporting learning, and other things. For our children, these are our 3 to 5-year-olds now, in that same study, we saw significant gains over time relative to the control group in areas like attachment, initiative, anxiety and withdrawal, language use. We saw differences over time in language use, reading, and some of the early writing. These are a teacher report of some of the child outcomes. But we really are interested in understanding how coolness intervention works. And so we did a series of moderation analyses. And one of the consistent ones that we found is that the children with whom there was a developmental concern as they entered preschool, these are 3 to 5-year-old studies now, we saw significantly greater gains for those kiddos in communication skills and language and some of the pre-academic areas. Also language use. The lack of English skills seemed to moderate the effects of language. So kids that did not speak English at home had poorer effects. Kids that were, lack of English skills moderated in a positive direction, so that kids who were not speaking English at home had greater outcomes. Some family moderators were true as well. One of the ones that I want to point out is parenting skills. So parental education. When parents came in with less than a high school degree or GED, we saw less skills development in our children's expressive language. But depression, on the other hand, had when parents had some depressive symptomatology, we actually saw greater treatment effects, similar to the effects that Karen was talking about with stress. So our next RCT then really wanted to look at teasing apart some of those moderated effects to understand if the intervention was delivered in the study where we really had that focus as our sample, what kinds of effects did we see? So we selected children who had a developmental concern when they entered preschool. And we started studying the effects of the intervention for that group that was not only developmentally delayed at the beginning of pre-K, but also low income. And so they were kind of doubly disadvantaged as they were entering preschool. Are just finishing that study now. So this is a paper that's about to be published, and we're finding again that the relationship outcomes are the things that are particularly promising to us. Relationships and social skills with children interacting with their peers. We see a significantly different trajectory over time, the 2-year period in preschool for children in the Getting Ready intervention. But also the parent-teacher relationship, which is really one of the really fundamental to our theory of change. That the change in relationship between parent and teacher over 2 years is significantly greater for parents when they're really connecting with their preschool educators in a unique way. And the student-teacher relationship, even though that's not a significant focus of our intervention, we're finding that there's some significant differences over time in this very relationally based intervention for those on that particular outcome. For children who enter pre-K with a developmental concern, we are beginning to look at what moderates the effects, and we're finding that a couple of interesting things are coming to light. This is a paper that we presented and we're about to be submitting for publication now, so it's still hot off the press. but the effects of the intervention seem to be greatest for families where there is less parent stress in the home. And so that's something that is different than some of the findings that have been talked about from the other intervention. So parenting stress seems to moderate expressive vocabulary in an unexpected direction relative to some of the other interventions that we see. However, what we are finding is that even when home involvement in the top graph is not high at the point in which educators and families come together at the very beginning of the intervention, we see some significantly greater effects for expressive vocabulary. So there's something about this intervention that is actually really focused on the kinds of things that parents and children are doing together. And when they really stay in a lot of room for growth, and the kinds of things that they're doing in support of their child at home, we see even greater effects. One of the things that we're really grappling with now is understanding more about the intervention. There's so much about it that we just don't know. So we're asking a lot of questions about mediation, for example. When Karen was presenting her results, Lisa and I looked at each other and we're like, we have mediation then, because we're really trying to understand the mechanisms by which our intervention is working. In some of our school age research with families and teachers working together as partners, we see consistently across our CTs that the relationship that parents and teachers have with one another mediates the effects of our intervention on a number of particularly social and behavioral outcomes. We've seen some direct effects in our, especially around, we've seen some direct effects in this particular preschool intervention, but the indirect effects have not, they've been really close, but not quite significant. So we're still trying to understand the importance of that relationship or other types of mediators that might be at play. Issues around the active ingredients. Karen mentioned this is a really important thing that we have to get at. All of these actually do have to do with scale up, right? They're all important to us as we think about scalability of this approach. And we really have to better understand how those strategies are working to support families, to support the relationship with their child, and support the relationship with their child's teachers over time. So we've done some work with some of the video data that we have, and we've coded video, we've done some factor analytic work to understand how those strategies hang together and which ones seem to predict outcomes. We are seeing some unique differences between our treatment control group in terms of the more advanced partnership-based, relationship-based strategies that early childhood educators use. Now, are those the active ingredients? We think it probably is some promise, but we have a lot more work to do in that area. We have to understand more about those informal opportunities, which are so hard to capture. So I think next on the list is fidelity. There's a lot of moving parts in this approach, a lot of things that are happening over the course of the relationship that a parent and teacher have with one another as families are working with educators across time, especially in an early childhood Head Start program where they might be with a particular provider for a couple of years. How do all of those interactions, especially those intentional but informal interactions, lead to the kinds of things that are important in terms of their relationship and the child's outcomes? It's hard to really capture, hard to measure. So measurement is a big issue that we deal with. Threshold, saturation factors has to do with dosage, actually. We heard a range of things today in terms of dosage and differences across programs from 6 to 16, I think, standardized meetings, but all kinds of things that happen then in between. And so really operationalizing all of that is very important. How much is enough, and how much do we really need? So that necessary and sufficient condition is something that we need to really better understand. Long-term effects, some of the other programs that you saw were monitoring progress of children over several years. We have data into kindergarten that we're still dealing with right now. We're still deep into understanding our kindergarten effects, but we don't know how our effects maintain over several years. And so that's a really important question for us. A few other kind of final things. This approach depends an awful lot on the provider really understanding how to engage families, how to promote child development, how to create partnerships, but also give away some of the things that they might have held dear in terms of their own roles and responsibilities. And so we're really understanding more about what kinds of things providers bring to the table, not only in terms of their values and their orientation, but even things like education level. The whole question of workforce is a big one when we're really talking about some pretty complex interventions or some big goals that we have around family engagement. It's not something that a lot of folks receive in some of their pre-service training. Costs I mentioned already a little bit, but I will say that our approach is supported in a very carefully orchestrated and delivered coaching model. I didn't talk about that at all, but our coaches are really instrumental in helping scaffold teacher skills. And we need to understand the real cost benefit of this approach, especially when we're talking about scalability. And that brings us to adaptations and scalability in a very direct way. How are we going to really bring some scale? Lisa's doing a lot of work in this area right now across a few different states in the Midwest. Has a lot to say about how we can make modifications and still retain what we think are the critical ingredients. And the various contexts within which we all work as early childhood educators. This intervention has been tested primarily in the state of Nebraska and surrounding states, but in all kinds of different contexts, early Head Start, public preschool programs, early childhood and toddler programs, center-based, and home visitation programs in the 0 to 3 space. And so we really have to understand all those variations and how things kind of interconnect and intersect in terms of efficacy. So you can find out more about the Getting Ready approach by visiting our website. I provided the URL. And we have on that site video exemplars. We have some research examples. Just an example, I don't expect you to read this, but the URL for our publications is listed at the top, where you can get access to a number of different papers that have been published over the years. And again, new things are coming out now with our current RCTs, as well as it's not out yet because we're still very much in the throes of the study now funded by ACF, the 0 to 3 space center-based programs, which is a whole different environment for family engagement. And there's my email and Lisa's email addresses. So thank you.